Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson. Happy December, everybody. Hope you're settling in for a nice, cozy holiday season. It's nice and chilly here in Austin. It isn't always that way in December, so I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts. Hope you're all queuing up your Christmas horror movies for the next few weeks. We have got a great show for you today. Our guests are Peter Hall and Paul Gandersman, the writers and directors behind the new horror film Man Finds Tape, which I really enjoyed. We're going to talk to Peter and Paul about how they made Man Finds Tape. And for the first time in the history of this podcast, we are going to do a two-story episode because Peter and Paul are two individuals who decided to pick two individual stories. So Peter brought Rob Reiner's amazing film Stand By Me, and Paul brought James Cameron's amazing film Aliens. That's right, we're talking about Stand By Me and Aliens in the same podcast. What do they have in common? More than you'd think. So I hope you're all looking forward to that. My recommendation this week is very on theme for this episode because my recommendation is Man Finds Tape. I have seen it twice now. I saw it a few months ago after it had its first festival premiere, and I saw it just a couple days ago preparing for the interview with Peter and Paul. I really dig it. It is a great faux documentary horror film with some really cool found footage elements in it, some great concepts, great characterization. My friend John Golson is amazing in it as a preacher who may or may not be up to something nefarious. Yeah, I just really enjoy it. And you can enjoy it too, because it's going to be out on VOD and in theaters December 5th. That is Friday, if you're hearing this the day it comes up. So, yeah, go check out Man Finds Tape. And if you want to know more about Man Finds Tape, you're not going to have to wait long, because we're going to head over right now to our interview with Peter Hall and Paul Gandersman. Joining us this week on The Scares That Shaped Us are a pair of Texas-based filmmakers you will know from films like No Signal and Scare Package. Their latest movie is called Man Finds Tape. It is in select theaters and on demand everywhere December 5th. Peter Hall and Paul Gandersman, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
This is Paul's voice. The other person is Peter.
Yes. We will iron out the who's who as we go. This is only our second episode with two guests, but we're gonna have a good time. Like I said, Man Finds Tape is out this week as we're recording this. I saw this movie a few months ago after it played Tribeca and really loved it. And then the folks at Fonz PR here in Austin were kind enough to send me a link ahead of this interview, so I've seen it twice now. I loved it both times. But for anyone who hasn't been kind of following this film as it's rolled out from festivals into a wider release this week, could y'all give our listeners a little taste of what they can expect from Man Finds Tape?
I usually describe it as, well, there's a couple different ways. If I'm like, out somewhere and someone finds out I made a movie and they're like, what's it about? I usually say, have you seen the movie Lake Mungo? And if they've seen Lake Mungo, then it's a pretty quick conversation because they understand what a fake horror documentary is. If they haven't seen Lake Mungo, it can be a bit harder to explain. But Man Finds Tape is a entirely fictional documentary. It's about a brother and sister investigating a series of strange videos in their small fictional town of Larkin, Texas. And it starts as sort of investigating a piece of footage that draws the sister back to town, which then ropes her into a sort of larger story that her brother had been involved with a viral web series called Man Finds Tape. And so it's sort of a like her investigation and his investigation end up becoming the same investigation kind of thing. And it's a horror movie through and through, but it's a sort of slow burn at first, and then it hopefully goes places that you won't expect it to go.
It's almost kind of like going down a Reddit creepypasta rabbit hole.
It is, and it has that really fun vibe of like you said, it starts with this it literally a man finds a tape. And one of the things that I was so attracted to in watching it was, uh, so his name is Lucas. His sister's name is Lynn. She's a documentarian who is now trying to figure out if her brother is telling the truth because he has a history of fictionalizing these things to get clicks. And I love that marriage of what it means for a video to go viral versus what it might mean for a video to actually sort of be viral in its own weird way. And it's got a preacher played by John Golson, so what's not to love? This film has so many layers to it, and I was so pleased to find that more layers emerged for me on the second viewing. But where does it begin for both of you? Like, what was the start of this story?
Well, first, I'm glad to hear that it held up on a second watch, and that there were more layers to it, because it's one of those things that it's the kind of movie that you can watch it one way. If you're tuned into just the brother and sister dynamic, you'll have a different experience than someone who's tuned into the religious horror side of it, or if someone who's just interested in the idea of wood monsters exist out there. They're going to have a different experience. So I think hopefully one of the benefits is each time, if someone were to watch it more than once, you could be tracking those different threads. But the initial idea always kind of came back to, what if we made a monster movie about how a monster may or may not exist in the 21st century, in the internet age of constant surveillance. That was sort of the initial idea, just broadly speaking. More specifically, it did start as we were going to potentially do this as an entirely scripted podcast many years ago, about a journalist going to this small town to investigate a viral video. That never happened. We didn't write a ton of that. It was more of just an idea. And then when we decided that our first feature would be a fictional documentary, we were like, well, what could fit that? And that's when the podcast one came back out. And it's a very sort of natural marriage between how would characters investigate a monster around them, and you could do an entirely traditional narrative version of this about a brother and sister just, surveilling their neighbors and looking into what's going on in their small town. But it's thematically, it just becomes richer when the format, the fake documentary, if the characters themselves are documentarians. And so we sort of ran with that ball.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I literally saw this meme earlier today of, I'm paraphrasing, but it said, if I saw Bigfoot, I would simply take a high quality in focus photo of him. And I think kind of like our original concept was like, what if that's not enough in the 21st century? Just, you can take the high quality in focus photo of the quote unquote monster, but that's not enough to prove it to people. And what's been really interesting as, because we started, I mean, again, the original idea was in the 2010s. Like, I remember Serial was brand new and big. Like, that's how old this idea is. And then we started writing the script in January of 21. So this is well before kind of the AI boom, or, the current AI boom and AI video and all this kind of stuff. And to anybody listening, our movie's not about AI. We don't say the word AI. There's no AI in it. But all of that happening has made kind of what the movie's talking about all the more kind of timely. Because now if I see an absolutely insane video, if Peter sent me a video of Bigfoot in crisp, clear 4K shot today, my default would be to assume that's not real. Yeah. That's fake. It's kind of, the world has turned us into unintentional, like, conspiracy theorists, where we don't believe the footage anymore. It's kind of 180'd everything.
Yeah. Well, and on top of all of that, you have this preacher who hosts, is it a web show or is it a public access show?
It's like a public access type show.
Okay. Yeah, he basically hosts a prayer hour for local viewers who want a little bit of extra Jesus in their lives. And I love the way that, as someone who grew up in a small town in Texas, I love the way that it plays with faith and with the idea that the people you trust, the power dynamics there with the way a preacher works specifically in a small town, which is its
Mhm.
own thing. Like there's the mega church dynamic for sure, but if you've ever been to a church where there's a preacher and like 50 parishioners, it's a different vibe, but the same like cult of personality in some ways. Y'all are Texas guys. I'm a Texas guy. If you've been to a town in the Texas Hill Country, you've probably seen something like Larkin, the fictional town where this takes place. Where did y'all shoot it?
We shot it in and around Austin. So Larkin, as you said, is a fictional town. It's cobbled together from quite a few different places. The sort of main street where the van footage takes place, that was in Granger, Texas, right, Paul?
Yeah, Granger.
Okay, yeah.
So
We shot in
that,
Salado, Buda,
yeah,
Bastrop.
the yeah, their
Maybe
house,
not
the
Buda.
the Page family house was up in Salado, which is
Slayer.
also where we shot the Salvation Hour stuff, which is the preacher's show. That was shot in a barn on the we built a set inside a barn for that. There's a bunch of stuff in Taylor, Texas. The church, the interior of the church is in Georgetown, but the exteriors are in Bastrop, I want to say.
Bastrop, yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was cobbled together from a bunch of different small towns, which I think in a way gives it this sort of weirdly universal feeling. Like it feels like it could exist anywhere, but it's also not one very specific thing.
Yeah,
I,
it was one of those things that was rooted out of budget, right? Like when Peter and I started writing the script, we knew, okay, we got to make something where like we're not going to have budget to travel a whole cast and crew, put everybody up in hotels for a month. Like it's got to source out of Austin, right? And so that's where, like I think Peter said, maybe, you drive 20, 30 minutes out of town and it's just middle of nowhere. And so it kind of worked together to kind of create this. It feels like a town that's real, but it's not because it's a little bit of pieces of everywhere.
it does like y'all had me like I've lived in this state my whole life, and y'all had me Googling like where's Larkin? Is it real? Did they
That's
use
great.
surely they didn't use a real town, right? Because that
Yeah.
when you said Granger, I'm like, okay, that makes sense because that main street felt so familiar to me. And that's partly because I've been to Granger, but probably partly because like you said, it looks like any small town. You could tell me it was Llano or Lockhart or whatever, and I'd go, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I
Yeah.
can see why that would be there. Um, it's just such a great Texas movie. It's in that lovely tradition of Texas horror movies, and as a Texas guy, it felt great watching it. And I hope that everybody goes and checks it out. Like I said, it's December 5th. You can see it in select theaters. You can also rent and buy it on VOD. It's really fun. And we'll talk more about it throughout this podcast. But for now, we're going to transition over because we have two guests, and for the first time, two stories. Because this is a show about foundational horror stories, and I reached out and said, "What do Peter and Paul want to talk about?" And they each picked their own thing, and I said, "Great, this is going to be fun." So for Peter's film, we're going to talk about Stand By Me, Rob Reiner's legendary 1986 coming of age film. And for Paul's, we're going to talk about another 1986 banger. I don't know if y'all planned that to have the same release year.
Nope.
No.
Nope. These are just the true stories of what shaped us. So
Two 1986 bangers, Stand By Me, and of course James Cameron's Aliens, one of the greatest sequels ever made to anything. I guess since I listed them in that order, we'll start with Peter. What do you remember about the first time you saw Stand By Me?
So, I mean, I remember watching it on a TV in my bedroom, off of a tape. I had taped it like off of HBO or something like that, but I hadn't seen the movie. So I think it was one of those things that was like I had heard friends at school talking about it or something like that, and it was coming up. So I had set the VCR to record it, and then I watched it later. Um, and I remember thinking that the kids in the movie felt like my friends. Like it's set 30 years before I would have been watching it, if not older, but their exact dynamic felt like my friend's dynamic. And I remember feeling a sort of kinship to both them as characters And like it is a place, even though I grew up at that point, I was living in inner city St. Louis, and Stand By Me is set in a very rural area. But I would also spend like my summers going to summer camps that were in the middle of nowhere and stuff like that. So that kind of, I had that familiarity to it. And I just remember thinking that it's not a, outright horror movie at all. And at the time, I didn't know that it was written by Stephen King. But it taps into that sort of like gentle darkness that you kind of explore as kids. Like, because it's about the story on paper is fucked up. Like, it's about some kids going to go search for a dead body. Which to be perfectly honest, if my friends were like, hey, I heard there was a dead body over on 15th Street, I probably would have been like, let's go see it. Like, let's go walk over and see what that looks like. So the whole setup to it, I think, just sort of entranced me because it felt like a story that could happen to me.
Yeah. Paul, what do you remember about the first time you saw Aliens?
Yeah, I don't think I knew that you had a recording of it, because mine was also a recording off of TV. But no, I mean, I grew up, in the, let's see, I was born in 84. So, grew up my first, 6 years in the 80s, or 5 years in the 80s. And at the time, for anybody listening younger now, maybe not realizing, back then, like, they were marketing all sorts of R-rated stuff to kids. There were RoboCop toys, Alien toys, Chucky, like all of these horror things were being marketed at kids. And so without even seeing these movies, they were in my mind. And I remember being a kid, maybe 5 years old, just like laying in bed at night with the images of Pennywise and Chucky and Freddy Krueger like flashing in my mind. And I don't know why I did this or where I got this idea, but I like mentally formed a town hall meeting where like all of the monsters were there, but I was like on stage with like a gavel and was like it was the bureaucracy of keeping the monsters in line with like meeting minutes and things, like kept them at bay, and I was able to fall asleep. So it says something about me, but that's how I kind of was dealt with fear as a child. So I think part of it was wanting to understand what these movies were, what these things were. And so my dad, favorite movie, Aliens, and he had a recording of it off of TV. And my mom, very protective, wouldn't let me watch almost anything. And so one Sunday afternoon, she's out doing errands, and my dad goes, okay, I'm going to show you Aliens, but you can't tell your mother. I'm 8. And Peter, how old were you when you watched Stand By Me?
I mean, I probably was around 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm 8. So anyway, he puts it in, terrifies me, freaks me out. The whole deal is I'm not supposed to tell my mom. My mom comes home. It's dinner time. I sit at the table. She puts in front of me a bowl of SpaghettiOs, and it's all red, and all I can see is the blood coming out, specifically the first chest burster scene because I didn't see the alien first. I saw Aliens first. And that's all I could see in my head. I immediately just broke down and I said, Dad showed me Aliens. I just narked him out like immediately. But I think for me, but I'm grateful for that, right? Because like it developed like a lifelong passion. And even to this day, I love being scared by horror movies. I have a very real fear of heights. I'll pass out on a roller coaster, but I love watching horror because it just controls my emotions. I get that experience that I'm not able to get physically on a roller coaster. And so, that just kind of like unlocked it. And then I just went on watching Twilight Zone with my dad, X-Files with my dad, going to see, I've seen Scream 1 I saw on video, and then the sequels we saw in the theater together. And I remember, the funny thing is, with this all starting with my mom being very protective, is I watched also on video at my buddy's house when I was maybe 12 or 13. I watched Scream and came home and immediately told my mom what I'd done. And I kind of saw like a fuse blow in her mind. And she just kind of, well, I can't do anything now. And the next day she recommended I see Rosemary's Baby. Like
That's
it
the
just
best punchline to this story.
and the funny thing is if you asked my parents today, do you like horror movies? They would go, "Oh no." But
Yeah,
they love them. They just there's something about the label of the genre and what they actually are that they can't like kind of realize or pair together.
it's such a funny thing the way that people will like say, "Well, I loved that movie Sinners. That movie was great, but I don't like horror movies."
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you do. You just like select ones, which is fine.
Yeah.
But my memory, I don't remember when I saw Stand by Me, but I have a great my the reason that like the Alien franchise is so close to my heart is the first time I watched them, I was 15 or 16. I was having wisdom tooth surgery.
Mm.
And so I was going to be home just recovering from wisdom tooth surgery. And a friend of mine just loaned me some DVDs because he was like, "You're going to be laid up for 2 or 3 days. Just like, here, what do you want to take?" And I was like, "Well, I've never seen all the Alien movies." So I took the Alien box set, the first four movies, and I took a few other things home.
The
And
quadrilogy.
the quadrilogy, as
I
as
had
it-
that set too. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did too.
The quadrilogy, which is a made up word, but it sounded fun. But so I took that home, and I just remember being like in a nice little cocoon of Vicodin, eating ice cream, and watching James Cameron blow stuff up, and just immediately was like, "This is amazing!" Like, how have I gone the first like 15 years of my life without knowing this? And I absolutely relate to the whole like my parents didn't let me watch this because my parents were very guarded about most things. Like it was very like you can't see a PG-13 movie until you're 13. That's the rule. You can't see an R-rated movie until you're 17. You cannot watch horror movies. My dad was very like, you horror movies will scare you and we don't want you to be scared. You cannot watch horror movies. Which didn't help because I would find stuff like Stand by Me where it was like talking about a dead body freaked me out.
Yeah.
And I would, he showed me Indiana Jones movies when I was like 10 and those are full of like scary moments. I remember seeing the Bond movie Live and Let Die and it freaked me the hell out because of all the snakes and weird voodoo stuff. And so going back to Stand By Me, like you said, it's not outright horror, but it is horrific in several different ways because everyone talks about the scene with the leeches, which is scary and strange, just absolutely freak. Because like I didn't grow up with leeches. I don't know about y'all, but where I lived in Texas,
I definitely. So I grew up in St. Louis, and then my dad was big into camping, so we would go out into the Ozarks to camp, and so I've definitely had leeches on me before, and definitely around that age. And so that scene was a horror set piece for me because it was like I always had a fear of leeches even before the movie, and then after that it just like cranked it up to 11. Yeah.
but so the leeches is kind of the centerpiece, but then there's the bullies who are just Stephen King writes bullies in a very straightforward way where there's not the nuance gets painted in later, and when you meet them, they are just absolute monsters. And I went to a very small grade school, so I didn't have bullies in like the classic sense. Like there were kids who were mean to me and kids who were not so nice, but I didn't have like the one kid who was like, "I'm gonna kill you if you do," But more than all of that, the thing that sticks with me, and I want to get your thoughts on what sticks with you the most, Peter, but the thing that sticks with me is the idea of we're going to go see a dead body. And as a kid, you think like, what's that going to be like? Because I'd seen dead bodies in funeral context, but that's very sanitized and prettied up. And you spend the whole movie when you watch it when you're young. I don't know what was your experience with what stuck with you the most beyond the leeches, because we already talked about the leeches, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was it as well. It was this sort of confrontation of death at a young age, and it also went hand in hand with my mom died when I was 9. And
Mm.
so that was around the time of me getting into this movie. And so it was like a sort of, way of processing where it was like, oh, these kids are like journeying to go process death. And then in my real life, I was processing death at that same age. Um, and so I think it was, weirdly cathartic to see them do it. And I think it's the ending of Stand By Me, not necessarily the ending, but the sort of conclusion of the search for Ray Brower is so beautiful to me that they find him and then they don't want to accept the sort of fame that would come with unearthing this kid. They just want to cover him back up and sort of expose it later. And I that in particular also really stuck with me as a kid, that these group of friends who are all my age could go off and have this adventure, but then kind of keep it secret. Like they sort of survived and triumphed in the end, but in the cheesiest way, the real triumph for the memories they made along the way. I don't know. I really liked that the entire sort of arc of it, where they confront the bullies, they confront death, they confront all this stuff, and they come out changed. And then changed in ways that they don't even realize until they are, decades older, when, Richard Dreyfuss is the sort of entire narration, and the way the story is framed is also something that even at that age stuck with me, where it was like the movie was making the statement that like these experiences that you're having right now, you're not going to realize they matter until you're like an old man. Yeah.
Well, this brings me to, as you were talking, I was thinking about this in the context of Man Finds Tape, and I don't think this is a spoiler for the movie. If it is, tell me, and we'll cut this part out of the show. But Lucas and Lynn, your protagonists, uh, they had to deal with their parents dying when they were young, and they
Mhm.
had to deal with that sort of. And I was going to ask like where that came from, and now I think I understand. Uh, it is a movie that deals with their past, their childhoods, in a very interesting way that very much informs the way each of them confronts these dark forces that may or may not be at work in their town, because Lucas is very confrontational about it. He is very like, I'm going to run towards this. I'm going to expose what's going on. And
Mhm.
Lynn is much more the sit back and cautiously await like evidence, and what counts as evidence, and how much of this is just my brother messing with me. And I see a lot of that in Stand By Me. Um, was that something y'all ever talked about, or am I just sort of spinning stuff up right now?
It's I don't
I
know
don't
that
think we
it's
talked about
Yeah,
that
I
in
don't think it's
particular.
anything that Paul and I talked about. It's definitely something that I've thought about, because, it's, impossible to not, for me, to not connect those dots of someone who experienced the loss of a parent at a young age, and then these characters having experienced the loss of a parent. It's at an older age in the movie, and it's not a spoiler. It's a bit of background for their characters. But it definitely was intentional for me to sort of infuse a bit of that sort of Stand By Me loss of in Stand By Me, he's losing his brother. And he's sort of there's multiple losses in Stand By Me. There's Ray Brower, who's dead, but then there's also his brother has died, and so he's sort of dealing with that at the same time. And in Man Finds Tape, there's the loss of the parents, and then there's other people who have died in the town, and they're sort of investigating it. And so now that we're talking about it, I'm like, did we just rip off Stand By Me? Um,
Sure,
but
why
no, I
not?
mean that dynamic is definitely it seeped its way in intentionally or not.
We should
I
just put
I
it on the poster. If you like Stand By Me, you'll like this. Just buy it.
I mean, like, yeah, I don't, I definitely not ripping off, but it definitely feels there is an element of Lucas and Lynn that feels like parts of their coming of age were sort of delayed, especially for Lucas, and they have to sort of reckon with that as they try to, because as much as it's about a brother who is doing his own investigation and a sister who is doing her investigation of his investigation, it is also about like a brother and sister trying to understand each other, which I think
Mhm.
is beautiful. Um, so now I'm gonna like really stretch metaphors because I have to figure out how aliens ties into this. Um, no, seriously though, like in Aliens is so is just such a fun movie. It is easy to put it on and just get absorbed in the freight train that is that movie. But when you see it multiple times, you break down all these sequences and you realize all these different ingredients that he's playing with, and how they all pay off. Um, what freaked you out the most when you first saw it, Paul? Do you remember? Do you have any
Yeah,
particular scenes?
it was the chest burster, the person, the first person they find, cocooned on the wall, and I think it's the person wakes up, and then it comes out. That was just the first time seeing that, just is seared into my mind forever. It was just, I'd never seen blood like that. I'd never seen a monster like that. I'd never seen gore like that. I'd never seen something so adult at the time. So all of it just kind of compounded, because up until that point, I guess at the beginning of the movie, you've got it almost coming out of Ripley in the dream sequence. But in my mind, I feel like I almost covered my eyes during that. And then I forced myself to keep them open when it actually happened. Because again, I was trying to kind of understand it and grapple with it.
The thing that always sticks with me in terms of horror in that movie is the facehugger sequence when they're locked in the lab, and
Sure,
the facehuggers are coming for Ripley and Newt. In part because like you see Alien and the facehugger is in Alien, but it does exactly what it says, what its name is.
Yeah.
It hugs a face, and then its purpose in the story is served. And then Cameron was like, well, what if they're like wolf spiders? What if they are just these like super fast little predators that are going to leap at you and chase you around rooms? And you're just like, I can't. And then Alien Romulus built on that and did like even more crazy facehugger shit.
I was going to say that Alien Romulus, that specifically one shot where they're running out of whatever, some lab or something, and they think they made it, and the camera pans back and they're all like stuck in the door. Like, I jumped out of my seat in the theater, like at that, like I hadn't had a scare that big since I was 8 years old watching Aliens. Like that shot in particular just wrecked me.
That and
Because those things, like I think the xenomorphs are still scary and freaky, but you're right. There's something about the spider like nature of the face huggers and how fast they move that, like, I would rather be in a room with a xenomorph than a face hugger.
I love the Alien franchise. It's one of my favorite franchises. I've never found the xenomorphs scary at all. It's the facehuggers.
Oh, we got a tough guy. We got a tough guy over here, y'all.
Well, no, like I think the xenomorph is scary in Alien. Aliens, it's more of a soldierly thing. Like I think Cameron likened it to a Vietnam War movie of like these high tech soldiers facing a more primitive but more determined other force that can just overwhelm them. And I don't know that I find the xenomorphs scarier. I think the facehuggers are the scariest for me, but the xenomorphs are still scary, and I just love everything Stan Winston did with that movie with the Queen and figuring out how to make the facehuggers like that. But I also love, and this is where I'm going to tie it back to Man Finds Tape. I love stories, especially horror stories, about people who are in over their heads. And it's Man Finds Tape is that kind of story, because it is just like they are dealing with things that they do not understand, and that are I'm not going to give away what happens and how it happens, but like there's just weird shit's going down, and it keeps getting weirder, and these siblings and the people around them are all baffled by what they're seeing, and to the point that they doubt their own eyes. And I think that the colonial marines in Aliens are so much that action hero that is just like, what are we doing? How do we, I mean, the famous part is Bill Paxton freaking out and saying, game over, man, game over. But all of them at some point or another are just like, this is bigger than anything we could have ever imagined, which I think is Jim Cameron's whole vibe. It's just like, I'm going to make this bigger and crazier than you can possibly imagine it to be. But what what sticks with you most? I don't want to tie it too closely to Man Finds Tape because it feels a little bit like a stretch. But Paul, what?
I
I think
Oh,
I can tie it in a way. I think I
oh,
can
go
tie it
for
in a
it.
way.
Go for it.
So I think Peter and I like to when we talked about kind of the horror element that we wanted to incorporate. There's a visual horror element in this film that we'd rather not say what it is because half of the fun is the surprise in it. But we wanted to write something that genuinely upset us, that scared us, that freaked us out. And I think, it's, let's say it's things coming out of bodies that shouldn't be in bodies. That is something that's uncomfortable to us. It's, we're inspired by like Junji Ito imagery, which is very uncomfortable for me in particular to read and look at. But that makes it interesting. So I think for us, it was kind of like, well, if it's uncomfortable and unsettling for us, then hopefully it will be for other people too. And I think, how was I going to connect to this to aliens? I don't even know.
I can
Peter,
connect. I mean,
Peter's got it.
so
Peter's got it. This is how we write. I just start rolling and I go, Peter, fix it.
I think it wasn't 1,000% intentional on our part, but the dynamic that you're responding to in Aliens of a sense that there's a big world and lots of like unknowns in it, but there's one character who is slightly more knowledgeable than the rest of the group. So in Aliens, that's Ripley, and the Colonial Marines are the ones who are catching up and figuring out like, oh shit, this is a horror story that we're in. And Man Finds Tape is kind of the same way. There is a character that shows up who is more knowledgeable than everybody else and knows what's going on, and then our main characters are very immediately thrust into a horror story. And that was we didn't use James Cameron's Aliens as a blueprint by any stretch, but we definitely used that. We wanted to play off those expectations and that dynamic that you think the movie is going to be one thing, and then the world keeps expanding and revealing new pieces of itself that you start to go, oh shit, I didn't know the movie was going to do this. That was
It,
always very intentional.
yeah, I think it's just kind of like movies like Aliens just infected our DNA, right? Our taste, but also too, it's kind of part of the mechanical process of making a fake documentary is we have to put so much attention and energy into making it feel realistic. And that's not to say that you'd come away from the movie thinking this really happened, but the suspension of disbelief requires a kind of a different tuning than a traditional narrative film. And so, part of that is performance. That's a big part of it. But part of it is the characters not understanding everything that happened. Not getting the answer to everything. And we wrote more answers than are in the movie. We shot less answers than we wrote, and then we edited the finished film has even less answers than we shot because we realized kind of as we were piecing it together, because we know everything, the big picture of everything that's going on. But as we kind of started, and this was really where like Rustic Films, Benson, Moorhead, and Lawson, our producers, sounds like a law firm actually when I say it like that, really encouraged us to start stripping away some of those puzzle pieces so that the audience kind of engages with it and fills them in on their own or assumes what they are. But I think if we ended the film where the characters were like, well, here is the answer to the mystery. We just saw Wake Up Dead Man. I love a Rian Johnson murder mystery. But we cannot have Benoit Blanc at the end of the movie going, here's everything that happened. It's what you expect for that kind of movie. But for this kind of movie, that would ruin it, in our opinion. That's kind of how we approached it.
Well, I didn't mention this when we were talking, but yeah, the Rustic Films, this very much feels like it's of a piece with the way that Benson and Moorhead do their mysteries. And for those who don't know, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead are the filmmakers who made stuff like Spring and The Endless and Something in the Dirt. And they do very cool like DIY indie horror things where you really don't get a lot of answers. You get enough that it makes for satisfying journeys for characters, but it's more about the experience of having gone through the thing than it is about the answer to the thing. What was it like working with them?
It was a total dream. The project came about very organically in that Paul and I designed this as something that we could do on our own if need be, and we were hoping that, we would attract some, more experienced partners along the way. And we sent it to Dave Lawson, who's the sort of unheralded champion of indie film, and the reason that Justin and Aaron's movies have sort of churned out over the years is because Dave is producing them. Um, and
Just to give a little bit of, like, Dave is so under recognized, like Something in the Dirt, which you called out, like literally the three of them made that movie. Like, if Justin and Aaron are in the shot, Dave was holding the camera. Dave's not a cinematographer. Like, that's how much of the team he is. Dave literally slept on an air mattress in my home office for 6 weeks because he wouldn't take $1 out of the budget for himself. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
And it was interesting because it's Something in the Dirt was the catalyst, because that movie has mixed media in it. It's filmed from a bunch of different cameras. It has a sort of fake documentary angle that's injected to it as well. And so we reached out to Dave, who we didn't really know that well, to just pick his brain about the, production realities of making a movie like that. And we were very, very lucky that he said that he would, read it. And then we took a call with us and gave us some advice. And then on that call, basically said, like, I would love to help in any way, whether it's just this call or as, boarding as a producer. And so then we pitched it like, well, what if it would be a rustic thing? And he tempered expectations by saying, like, it's very rare that Justin and Aaron and I all agree on material to be like, this is a rustic film. So I'm not promising anything. And we didn't hear anything for a couple months. And then eventually they reached out and much to our surprise said they wanted to make it. And it's funny because Dave said that he gets scripts all the time where, like, the starting pitch is, oh, this is just like a Justin and Aaron movie. And I think he responded to the fact that we didn't pitch it that way. We weren't like, this is what Bunsen and Moorhead do. It was more of a like, what you do is also what we like. So, like, can you help us figure out what's going on? And then the three of them were so instrumental along the way. And there actually wasn't a ton of that changed on the script once they came on board. There's sort of notes on the script stage where, oh, this character could say less, and in that case it was like, oh, actually the last draft of that script the character did say less, and we had changed it based on someone else's notes, so we'll just go back to that version and stuff like that. And then by the time we were in the edit, they were super influential in that they kept pushing for us to stick closer to the tone and spirit of the script. There were different versions of this edit wise where it was much faster paced or was explaining more or whatnot. And so they really sort of helped us protect the initial idea and, like, sort of hold off on, if we sent it to three filmmakers and one of them had a question of like, oh, why did this happen? Of being like, you don't necessarily have to answer that question. Like, they were the ones that sort of gave us permission to be like, no, it's okay to not explain everything. Like, it's okay to ignore notes from other filmmakers. And then they also, at times, they would give us notes and then say, and it's okay if you ignore us on this note because it's your movie. So just they're sort of enabling us to treat ourselves as filmmakers was a huge deal.
Yeah, we could not have found more perfect, like, partners and mentors, really, for this film in particular. It's kind of ridiculous how it all came together. We literally couldn't have had a better team.
I also want to shout out, the episode hasn't gone up yet. It'll go up later this month, but I was talking to C. Robert Cargill for the show, and we talked a little bit about Man Finds Tape, and he and his wife Jessica are executive producers. Is that their credit on the So he was telling me that basically, he does not take credit for your film. He says, I cut a check, that's all I did, but we were happy to help out because he called it the Fantastic Fest movie. It is a movie made by Austin people, for everyone, but it also feels like for Austin people, and that, I think, is very much with the Benson and Moorhead ethos of make movies with your friends. That feels like what you guys got to do, and it works beautifully, and it really, you can feel the enthusiasm in it. Um, before we go, I want to ask, because this, you mentioned Lake Mungo, which is one of my favorite movies. Um, we have had a sort of mini boom of fake documentaries in recent years. Lake Mungo is a while ago now, but when you look at stuff like Fake Documentary Q on YouTube, Your Movie, stuff like Strange Harvest, Zodiac Killer Project, which it's kind of a stretch to call that a fake documentary because of the things it does.
Yeah.
And even to a much smaller extent, Shelby Oaks, which I know that Stuckman has listed Lake Mungo as an influence there. The fake documentary thing is a very popular storytelling device right now. I think partially because we are bombarded with so much fake bullshit now, that the idea of exploring fiction through a documentarian's lens is super appealing because of all the layers it gives us. Why did it appeal so strongly to both of you?
Well, I mean, I think the answer is probably not as exciting as you would hope. It started out of practicality. Peter and I were trying to make another movie for pre-pandemic for a while that was just way too big. We eventually adapted it into fiction, our novel, The Dead Friends Society, which was released in 22. And coming out of well, we were still in it, but it was January 21, and we were talking about how, we got to come up with something that if everyone else says no, we can just save up money, sell some stuff, and make it on our own. And we said, what's our strength? What's our advantage here? And I've been working in sports documentaries for the past decade. I know how to produce them. I know how to edit them. I have a co-editor. We have a documentary cinematographer. Another advantage, my wife is an incredible production designer, can do wardrobe, can do, all these things, produce as well. And, so we kind of just started there, and I think we just said, okay, what if we did a fake documentary? Because budgetarily, that allows you to work far cheaper. It shouldn't look perfectly lit, right? It should be a little rough around the edges to feel real. So, okay, if we were going to do something like this, what would we want to do? And then that's where it started to get creative, right? That's where we started to dig into kind of the themes, the concepts of like, how do you tell a story about finding a monster in the 21st century when you can't believe, footage that you see, right? If you had a crystal clear, I think we talked about a crystal clear photo of Bigfoot, right? Like I wouldn't believe it. And I think it kind of starting with those parameters and then just floating in our head the popularity of true crime and again, being fans of Lake Mungo and films like that, it all just kind of, we threw it all in the pot and we got a stew going. I don't know, Peter, what am I leaving out there? I feel like that was kind of it. And it's interesting hearing you talk about how popular it is now, and you're right. But back when we were like coming up with this, we were having to explain to people like, it's a fictional documentary. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
like yes, there had been more done, but like it's not like right now. Like even that 5-year difference, it was huge. There was something in the water 5 years
there's
ago.
definitely it's something in the water. I mean, my day job is I'm a senior programmer at South by, and so I watch hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies each year that most people in the world are never going to see, in that sort of volume. And I definitely, in the years since we first started making Man Finds Tape, started to see a rise of fake documentaries in the genre space. And so I don't know if it's because true crime became more popular, and so that it goes hand in hand there of doing sort of fictionalized true crime formats. I don't know. It was a nice benefit on our part that we kind of stumbled into a popularity of it, because I'm a believer of like a rising tide raises all boats kind of thing, that like I think it's great that there's a little mini boom of it and that we get to be part of this sort of resurgence of found footage. It's funny, when the trailer dropped, there was Fandango posted it on their TikTok, and it did really, really well, and it got tons of comments, and there were just like hundreds of comments that were like, finally, found footage is back. And I'm kind of like, well, found footage never went anywhere. Like, for people who like found footage, it's been there. Like, people have been eating well on found footage for a while now. We're sort of just sliding into that. But when the fake documentary of it, as Paul was saying, when we first made that choice, we did have to onboard people onto the idea of it, because there were like the thing that you would point to was Lake Mungo. Like, that was the standard, or that was the most known property that kind of did it. There are more obscure things, Japanese films and whatnot, but it was because people would be like, oh, it's like Blair Witch. And it's like, well, it's not. Blair Witch to us is not a documentary. That is a found footage movie. That is people who pressed play and stop on their footage. It's not interviewing talking heads. It's not presenting material that the filmmakers didn't see in real time and things like that. And so it's nice to see that we're not alone in our sort of enthusiasm for the format, because it's a fun format to play with.
It really is. I want to go back to something Paul said before we go here. He mentioned, he said you got a stew going, so I have to ask, as a fan of I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson, would the two of you say that Man Finds Tape is kind of a cosmic gumbo?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good, yeah.
It's a cosmic gumbo, for sure.
Put that on the poster.
Put it on the poster, everybody. Man Finds Tape, as we have already said, is available December 5th on VOD and in select theaters. If you can see it in a theater, go do that. If you can't, rent it. It's great. One of my favorite movies, one of my favorite horror films of the back half of 2025 for sure. Peter, Paul, before we let you both go, can you let everyone know where they can find you online?
Well, first, thanks for saying that. And then second, I'm just on Facebook or Instagram and Blue Sky as Peter Hall Human. Those are kind of the only two places I really post.
Yeah, same for me. Just Paul Gandersman, all one word.
All right. Our guests have been Peter Hall and Paul Gandersman. Everybody go watch Man Finds Tape. Peter, Paul, thank you both for being on the show. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Great talking to you, too.
Thanks so much to Peter Hall and Paul Gandersman for being on the show. Man Finds Tape is available December 5th. That's Friday on VOD and in select theaters. However you choose to watch it, you should check it out. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that interview gave you even more reasons to want to see it. Be sure to follow Peter and Paul over on social media and keep track of everything they've got going on. They're cool guys, local Austin dudes who make cool stuff and are a big part of the film community here. So go check out what they have going on. And if you want to check out everything we have going on, the best way to do that is to follow us on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social over there. That is where you will get new guest announcements every episode of the show and giveaways whenever we do a giveaway, plus some other fun stuff. Head over there and give us a follow if you like the show. We're also The Scares That Shaped Us on Facebook, and we are The Scares That Shaped Us on YouTube. If you like to listen to your podcast that way, head over there, like and subscribe. We really appreciate the support. We may be doing some stuff with video in the new year, so if you are interested in stuff like that, head over there and smash that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. We also have a newsletter at MatthewJacksonWrites.com. That's writes as in WRITES, because I'm a writer. Get it? At MatthewJacksonWrites.com, you will find original writing about the horror genre from me, as well as episodes of the show and some other cool stuff. We had a guest post go up last month from our friend Clay McLeod Chapman. You can go read that. Pretty much all the content over there is free right now. We do have paid tiers. You can kick in $1 or $5 a month to help me out, support my writing, support the show. But you don't have to do that. You can go over there and read a bunch of stuff for free, including 31 straight days of essays on John Carpenter's Halloween, which explains why November was a little quieter on the newsletter, because I was exhausted after writing 31 essays on my favorite movie. But yeah, that's all over there. Head over there, put in your email address, subscribe. You will get all of it straight to your inbox. And as always, if you like the show, please tell your friends. Let everyone know that you're enjoying what we're doing over here. We could always use more listeners to help us grow this thing. If you have the time and you are so inclined, you could also head over to the podcasting app of your choice and leave us a 5-star review. That helps us out immensely. The more 5-star reviews we get, the more we get featured on various podcast platforms, which helps us grow our audience, which we really want to do because I want to keep doing this thing forever. That is it for us this week. We will be back next week with another brand new episode. Our guest is our first ever 4-timer, Clay McLeod Chapman, the original guest, the final guest, the only guest. Clay McLeod Chapman will be back next week. That is December 10th at noon Central. We're going to talk to Clay about his new young adult novel, Shiny Happy People, as well as the books he has coming up in 2026. And in keeping with the themes of Shiny Happy People, we're going to talk about one of the greatest horror remakes of all time, the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, directed by Philip Kaufman and starring Donald Sutherland. It's a banger. We had a great time, as we always do when Clay is here. Again, that will drop December 10th at noon Central. Hope you all come back then. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.